بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم الصادق الوعد الأمين اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت عليم حكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام من يرد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. So alhamdulillah, it's great to see mashallah such a good turnout in order to learn knowledge and to learn the lives of the people of knowledge. One thing that is very important is that nothing is created out of nowhere. You have to get knowledge from somewhere. There is no one that can stand up and say, I'm a student, anyway, in regards to the sacred knowledges, that I am a student who have no teacher, or I am a teacher who had no teacher before him. This is a statement that is perplexing in the realm of the Islamic knowledges and the Islamic sciences. Because as Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah says, al-isnadu min ad-deen, that isnad is from deen. To have a chain of narrators is from deen. وَلَوْلَا الْإِسْنَادِ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. If it wasn't for isnad, then anyone would have been able to say whatever they want. So when it comes to the knowledge of deen, we learn it from someone who learned it from someone, and we link ourselves. And this is how we receive certificates and qualifications. That the field of ijazah is that you have been given ijazah, that person received ijazah right up until Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So that is how it works. So you go to the people of knowledge, and this is how you learn. So mashallah, may Allah Ta'ala reward you all, and all of those people mashallah who are also listening online and who are watching this online. May Allah Ta'ala also reward you as well and reward your efforts. So as we said, the example of learning, right, and attaining the sacred knowledges is an example mashallah that we see time and time again in the lives of the pious people, right up into the beloved generation of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Even Abdullah ibn Abbas, he was from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Despite that, right? Despite being from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do we see? What do we see? Does he say, I'm from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and that's it? No. He stays outside the house of his teacher, waiting for the knowledge to come to him. Making sacrifice, right? Before we went through the life of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, we heard how many sacrifices he went through. We read through the life of Imam Abu Hanifa'srh, through the life of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, through the life of Imam Malik rahimahullah. And we also did a little bit of the life of Imam Shafi'i. We can see time and time again this concept of sacrifice is important. And verifying and going through a vetting process who you take your knowledge from. Very important. There has to be a vetting process. That is why the final hadith that we find in the Jami' al-Tirmidhi is what? Muhammad bin Sirin rahimahullah says what? Says, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. That this knowledge is deen. So watch who you take it from. Be careful. Watch where you take it from. Because this knowledge is your deen. And your deen is like your libas, it's like your clothes. You know, so like we're specific what brands we wear, isn't it? You know, we're specific what brands we wear. We don't just wear any brand. When we look for a shoe, we look for a good shoe. It might cost a couple of $100, but fine, no problem. Because we want a shoe that's going to last. When we pick something, we want to have something that lasts. So فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. Watch where you take your deen from. Listen, watch where you take your deen from. That's why we're also specific which airlines we fly with. Because we want a good track record. Right? A good track record. I'm not doing advertising. I'm not advertising from anyone. But Qantas has a very good track record. In terms of safety, it's one of the best in the world. So when people go fly with them, they say, okay, no, it's just one of the track records are very good. So track record is also very important. Right? So adab has to be there. And Rasulullah used to mentor the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. So going through and finding a mentor in Islam and finding a mentor for your knowledge, mashallah, is very, very important. Someone to guide you, to show you, okay, this is right, this is wrong. This is very important. So to find that guide. So this is what we find time and time again in the life of the pious people. So coming back to the life of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, we're going to have to wrap up everything because mashallah, we've taken such a large break. It's like, everyone knows, the students when they go for a holiday, they say kal adam, everyone comes back. So what happened? That's why the teachers have to actually institute holiday homework. Because at least there's some connection back to the work, isn't it? So inshallah, let's summarize again what we went through previously. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, we know that his family is connected to the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Through many different means, right? Primarily through his mother, who was a descendant of Hassan ibn Ali radiallahu anhu. So both a descendant of Hassan radiallahu anhu and Ali radiallahu anhu. So she's Fatima bint Abdullah ibn Hassan ibn al-Hassan, right? So she's known as Fatima bint Abdullah ibn al-Hassan ibn Ali. So she's from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Through his father's side, there is a sahabi that is called Saeed ibn Ubayd al-Hashimi radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he was the paternal grandfather of the Prophet of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. And he came from a tribe known as the Banu Muttalib. What is the significance of the Banu Muttalib? The significance of the Banu Muttalib, Rasulullah said about the Banu Muttalib that they are with us because Muttalib was the cousin of Hashim, and Hashim was the great-grandfather of the Prophet. Abdul Muttalib was the grandfather. Don't get confused between Abdul Muttalib and Muttalib. Right? So Abdul Muttalib was the grandfather of the Prophet Muttalib was the great-grandfather of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, and he was a cousin of Hashim. So what's the significance of him? Rasulullah says about the Banu Muttalib, Rasulullah says that what? Rasulullah used to refer to the Banu Muttalib as Dhawil Qurba. They are the close ones. Connection. We have a connection with them. Right? How honored must you be that Rasulullah says that we have a connection with these people. So they were Dhawil Qurba, and Rasulullah said about that, in praise of them, he said they never left us. They never left us, whether in Jahiliyyah or in Islam. They were always with us. Interesting story about the grandfather of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, Sa'ib ibn Ubayd. Why is it that we always find in the pious people, there is some goodness in their ancestors? Did you notice that? It's like a link always. Imam Abu Hanifa'srh rahimahullah, same thing. Though he came from a non-Arab background, his father and grandfather, they were known for their goodness and their piety, right? So Imam Malik rahimahullah, we find the same thing about his grandfather, right? So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, we find that his ancestors, they accepted Islam, So there's always some good story behind it. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for us? Usually you get this story, it's very common. Brother, come speak to my son. Brother, come speak to my children. Sheikh, come speak to my children. Sheikh, make dua for my children. Okay, dua is there, advice is there. But the number one best thing you can do in order to have pious children is that you yourself become pious. That's the best thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You yourself change. There are rare occasions, yes, there are rare occasions where one goes in one direction, the other one goes in the other. Rare occasions, right? But for the majority of the case, if you want your children to change, you change yourself. So Sa'ib ibn Ubayd, right? What do we find about him, radiallahu ta'ala anhu? What do we find? We find that in Badr, he fought against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was then captured. But he wanted to accept Islam. So he never used his Islam as a means of getting off free from being a prisoner. Right? So he first paid his ransom and then he accepted Islam. He wanted to accept Islam before. But he didn't use that as a means of getting free. He first paid his ransom and then he accepted Islam. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is known as, what's his full name? Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. So Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. And he was born in which year? 150 Hijri. In Hijri calendar, 150. Why is it 150 significant? Does anyone know? It's the same year that Imam Abu Hanifa'srh was born. According to some scholars. Some. Opinion is there. That it could have been possible that he was born, and I don't know how that would have been told, how that would have been judged, but he could have been born on the same day that Imam Abu Hanifa passed away. But majority of the opinion says this is where the weak opinion is, but the strongest opinion is it is in the same year, right? In the same year. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was born in Gaza, in Palestine, right? In Gaza, what is Gaza today? Right? In a place called Asqalan. So Asqalan was known for a very, also another great alim that came there many generations later, 8 generations later, who also came from not family, but in terms of the school of thought of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, and he's known as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, who was the famous author of the most in-depth and the most voluminous commentary on Bukhari. That's the very famous work of the Sahih al-Bukhari. So, and it was known as Ghazzatul Hashim, right? Gaza was known as Ghazzatul Hashim. Why? Because Hashim, the great-grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, passed away over there, right? So, and as we know, his father was from the tribe of what? The Banu Muttalib, and we've discussed their significance as well. His mother, rahimahullah, we know her name as well, Fatima bint Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, right? Ibn Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And so she was linked also with the Bani Azdi ibn al-Shalu'a, right? Azdi ibn al-Shalu'a. So something important about the Azdi ibn al-Shalu'a, Rasulullah ﷺ says, when he described Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, in the hadith that describes the physical features of Musa alayhi salam, Rasulullah ﷺ says, كَأَنَّهُ رَجُلٌ مِنْ أَزْدِ الشَّنُوءَ. He looked like the people of the Azdi al-Shanu'a, right? Whatever type look that they had, right? So it was such that he was orphaned at an early age. And when he was orphaned, his mother decided to take Imam Shafi'i from Gaza to, right? To where? To Makkah Mukarramah. She decided to take him all the way down because she was known to be a great Zahida and a great Abida, right? So she decided to go to Makkah because this is where the hustle and the bustle was. There was ulama, there was madrasas. It's like here in Melbourne, when people move to areas where there's Islamic schools, there's places where there's memorization of Quran, there's ulama, like here, mashallah, this center is here. People decide to come a little bit closer because there's activities of deen happening. So she decided she wanted to go to Makkah Mukarramah because it was the Haram al-Makki, of course, but also to get in contact with the beloved tradition of the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and also to get in contact with the students of the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in, and everyone that was there at the time, right? Very interestingly, there are hadith that indicate towards Imam Shafi'i. And who's this from? Musnad Imam Ahmad. From Imam Ahmad himself. And who was Imam Ahmad to Imam Shafi'i? Does anyone know? He was his student. Right? Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, the famous Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who memorized almost 1 million ahadith. How many? 1 million ahadith. And if you count, subhanallah, if he was to revise every hadith that he memorized, how long would that take? Just try and calculate it. And then you say it's impossible that he revised them even. It's just the fact that his memory was so good. It was only, just to memorize them. So that's when you understand the fact of barakah and mashallah, the fact that they could be able to do so many things at one time. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to say, and there are a number of scholars that debate this as well, but he used to say, if it's not in my kitab, it's not a hadith. I've got so many, he had 40,000 hadith, right? 40,000 hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmad, right? 40,000 hadith. He used to say that if it's not a hadith, if it's not in my kitab, it's not a hadith. Meaning that at least the mutun of the hadith, a lot of the written words of the hadith, maybe not the sanads, the chain of narrators, but the wording is in my kitab. But some ulama have debated this and they have disagreed as well, because there are a number of main ahadith which are not present in Muslim Imam Ahmad. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah brings this hadith in his kitab that Rasulullah says that, "Oh Allah, guide the Quraish, for the science of the scholar that comes from them will encompass the entire earth." And that's why you find, subhanAllah, you find Shafi'is all the way, subhanAllah, so far away from Mecca Mukarramah in Indonesia. Right? People who follow his school, right? Here in Australia, how far can you get? Right? So, meaning that it's going to spread all throughout the world, right? And another narration which alludes to the coming of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is that the first part of Quraysh tasted bitterness, let the last part of Quraysh taste reward. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to say that if I am asked a masla and I don't know the answer to it, then I used to take it from Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, because he is a scholar and the Imam from Quraysh. Right? He used to refer to him with the same things that Rasulullah ﷺ was indicating to in the hadith. Wallahu a'lam, Allah knows best. It can fall in any direction, but we're just saying that there are some supporting possible statements that are there. So now they arrive in Mecca, right? And she once said, his mother said to Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, she says that, "Oh Muhammad," right? His name was Muhammad, right? She said, "We are poor and we have no money, and I have vowed not to get married for your sake. And I have given you and devoted you to the pursuit of knowledge, that Allah Ta'ala make you the culmination of all the great scholars and knowledge of this ummah." Right? So when we want our children to become pious, right, it's going to take sacrifice. Ask any parent, their child has gone through the knowledge, through the memorization of Quran, hifz, just hifz. Forget about just the studies of alim scholars. To do hifz, it's like the parents are doing hifz. They have to sacrifice, wake up their children early, make sure they revise. There's so much sacrifice in it. So the parents also require sacrifice. So inshallah, when these classes are available for you here, then you should immediately avail yourself to do this. And get ready for it. Because you don't know what great scholars are waiting. SubhanAllah, we have so many children who are sitting here. We don't know what great scholars are sitting there. There was a time when I used to be a small kid, used to sit in these gatherings too. Brother Ibrahim remembers when I was that age. That people know that when I was a small kid and I used to just sit in these gatherings. Just go around, just sit around and see, okay, what's good there, what's going to happen there. So you don't know what's going to happen. So they arrive in Mecca and then they get set up, and then their relatives start to help them, they start helping them, right? And they set up at least the bare minimum is help for them. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah starts going to the gatherings of knowledge. However, he's wearing clothes that are like, and people look at them and they're like, nah, something's, it's not, because you want people to wear proper clothes, Our people, we don't care, subhanAllah, the same clothes he's wearing in the work, he comes to Jum'ah in that clothes. And I'm not talking about nice office jobs, where everything is nice, neat and clean and air conditioned and everything, We're talking about some rough and tough work, right? And they come with grease on their things and they come sit down and you say, subhanAllah, like you didn't even take 2 minutes just to get changed, to come to the Jum'ah, right? So, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he comes, but he has no choice. It's not like us. He has no choice. He doesn't come from a well-off background. So, he comes up with all these clothes where he looks very destitute. And we also get afraid. When we see poor people, we also get afraid. We're like, because we're afraid not because of them, but for our money. We don't want anyone to ask us anything. Right? Because to ask us something is the biggest crime in the world. How could you ask? This is like, you've committed a crime. When Rasulullah says that if your brother asks you for help, you are the help of Allah Ta'ala is in the help of his slave, as long as his slave is in the help of his brother. As long as you help him. So people say, oh, how could you ask? So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he goes. And now he goes to sit in the gatherings. And he's wearing these clothes. And he starts seeing what normally we also see as well. People start avoiding them. Don't want to sit with them, Don't want to sit. And he gets hurt. He's a kid. He's a child, right? In the end of the day, he's a child at that time. And he gets hurt because it's like what happens, you get afraid now, your child comes back, he said, no, but the other one, he got the iPad Pro. How come I don't have iPad Pro? I want the iPad Pro. Or I want this new PlayStation, or I want this new thing, because the other kids have got it. And you don't think that you give all your children all of these things, they come to school with the latest things, and then now what happens? So it hurts, it affects children, Ask those people who were raised up very destitute, it affects them, right? It burns in them, the fact that they don't have these things. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he comes back home, he doesn't want to sit in the gatherings of knowledge anymore, because everyone is looking at him like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Like, did you come to the right place? And because also those days, people now, if we charge people to learn the deen of Allah Ta'ala, everyone looks at us like, astaghfirullah brother, what are you doing? Like, deen is meant to be free, and you're meant to be Sheikh, you're meant to be living on manna and salwa, and we're meant to pay for everything for you. Everything is meant to be free. The masjid just comes up. Masjids are like natural structures, just like the trees, and they grow by themselves. That's what we think, isn't it? So even in those days, there used to be like a pay system for the teacher, and those who used to sit in the halqa had to actually pay in some way or form. And Imam Shafi'i couldn't pay. So everyone is avoiding him. He's not, when he wants to ask a question, the teacher is not answering. Right? Because there's no fees. Right? You know what I mean? So anyway, so he comes back home and he tells his mother what happened. And so she tells him, she says, okay, don't worry. His mother says to him that, my dear son, present yourself for the knowledge. Bring yourself there. Bring yourself for the knowledge. And he asked his mother that, how do I do this? And so she said that you enter the gathering with such adab and such respect. No, we don't know what respect is. Then we don't know what respect is. You go home and no one knows what respect is. Children are sitting on top of the tables. Everyone, when you have family gatherings, everyone is on their phone. There's no such thing as respect anymore. Am I right? No one knows what respect is. May Allah Ta'ala give us back this adab. So she says, go to the gathering with respect and adab. And go with such adab that no one notices you. And just listen to what the teacher is saying. And everything that the other students are doing while they're learning, you go and learn with them. When the teacher goes, go and learn with the students. And so he did that. And subhanAllah, just by doing that, and sitting on the corners, and when the teacher leaves, the students are sitting down and they're learning, that he became an expert. And he actually started teaching the students. And he actually started, whenever they got stuck, he used to help them. And then what do we find? That when the teacher was absent, Imam Shafi'i became unofficially the tutor of the students. And so when the teacher started noticing that the students were getting so sharp, and there was a great level of improvement in them, then he was asking, what happened? What made it such that these students change? Then he found out that it was Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. And immediately he made him an official student on one condition, right? That he becomes the assistant of the teacher. And this was at which age? 6. He became a teacher aide at the age of 6. Today I was listening on the radio in Kansas in America, there is a governor's election. And there is a 17-year-old who is running for governor, to become a governor. And everyone's like, he's 17, he's 17, he's 17, you know. And his grandfather and his parents are behind him and everyone is behind him. They said, no. He said, he's got just the right just as anyone else. 17. You know? And what are our 17-year-olds are doing? In Kansas today, 17-year-old American boy is running for governor. And our 17-year-olds, what are they running after? So we have to wake up, brothers and sisters. So, subhanAllah, he becomes a student, he becomes his teacher's assistant. So because he was teaching, now he was earning a little bit, and he would try to pay the teacher for the classes. And when he would teach, he would say, when he came to the teacher and tried to pay the teacher, he would say that it is not allowed for me to take from you, just keep teaching. The teacher used to say, it's not allowed for me to take from you, just keep teaching. You see how Allah Ta'ala opens up? Because we think that we need, we have to plan out everything and we need, so all like this. But he just presented himself and he gave. So, and at the age of 7, subhanAllah, that was at the age of 6. At the age of 7, he memorized the entire Quran. And at the age of 9, he memorized the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah, which was known at the time as the most Sahih kitab after Quran. Because Muwatta Imam Malik, because Imam Bukhari quotes Imam Malik rahimahullah in his kitab, so obviously it was written before Imam Bukhari rahimahullah's kitab. So Muwatta Imam Malik rahimahullah, he memorized it at the age of 9 in 9 days. In 9 days. Right? This is when your mind becomes focused on doing something. This is tawfiq ilahi, there's no doubt about that, there's tawfiq ilahi. But there are people today who spend day and night learning different things. Am I right? There are people who learn different things, who play games, right? They'll play games continuously. But if there's a 2-week school holiday, they play the entire 2 weeks. They don't even take breaks. And then they say, they come back to their friends and they say, no, we finished this game, we finished that game, we finished that game. So, we are applying ourselves in the not most appropriate fashion. We have to apply ourselves in the right fashion. So he was so poor that his mother needed to collect camel skins and bones left over, and she used to collect even government papers that were, people used papers that people never used again. She used to go to the bin in all of these places and used to go to the dumps where there was large garbage and everything, and she used to collect from their stationery and everything that he used to need. And she would collect ink and ink ponds from the ministers of the government. And his mother would also set up for him classes with different, she used to find out, research, okay, which one is the good alim, and she used to go send her son there. So the mother was part and parcel of the learning of their children. Right? And she was a single mother. Widowed. Right? She's by herself. Right? Okay? So she is the one who set up all the classes, even with Sufyan ibn Uyayna, rahimahullah. So at age 9, he memorized the Quran. And he memorized the Muwatta. So by now he's memorized Quran, 7. 9 he memorized Muwatta. And his recitation of Quran was fantastic. And it was, mashallah, he was like a wonder of the world. And his mother now wanted him to start studying and focusing on the Arabic language. And how he expressed himself in the language. So he's an Arab. Right? Born in an Arab area. Right? Raised in an Arab culture. And she wants him to learn Arabic. What's the meaning? Meaning Arabic is a very deep language. Right? Just because you speak Arabic doesn't mean you can translate Quran. Right? It's not as simple as that. No, she went and go in depth into the language. So his mother wanted him to start focusing on his depth in the Arabic language and how he expressed himself in that language. So as a result, he starts to spend time with the Banu Muttalib. And the Banu Muttalib was a tribe of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. right? And on and off he used to study with them Arabic for how many years? Anyone guess? For 17 years. 17 years on and off he used to study the Arabic language. Right? And he was known for his, because they were known for their eloquence and purity of Arabic. And as we know, if we backtrack to the seerah, Rasulullah ﷺ, as a baby, was sent where? With the Bani Sa'd. With Halima Sa'diyya radiallahu ta'ala anha. And he was sent for what reason? Many reasons. Why? It's more natural to get raised up in the farm areas, and you don't have the pollution of the city, manners and different things, but also language. Because the purest Arabic was always spoken for by those people who weren't. Because in the cities you see a lot of foreign people used to come, and there was all this mixing and slang and all of these things. But in the countryside area people used to speak very, very good Arabic. Right? So for 17 years he would study with them. So meaning on and off. And he said, I spent amongst the best and purest form of Arabic language for 20 years, and I learned all the different dialects and accents. All the different dialects and accents, right? And I mastered horse riding and archery to the extent that I got to the level where I could hit 10 out of 10. Right? Extremely, well, and Rasulullah says about archery, he says it's not something that is a waste of time. Right? It's not like, because it helps your hand-eye coordination. Right? So it helps your hand-eye coordination and your mental, your mental acumen and acuity is developed. Right? So it's important to develop hand-eye coordination, and all, of course, everything that falls under that, it will also fall under that, right? So one of the students that was listening to this amazing account says that, Wallahi, you were able to achieve more in your knowledge than you did in your archery. When he heard this, Imam Shafi'i said what? He said, you were able to achieve more in your knowledge. So if you got 10 out of 10 in his knowledge, and his archery, then how much was his knowledge, right? So we know that, subhanAllah, his poverty was so immense that he said that despite all these halaqat, him and his mother would actually struggle to find food overnight. But because of the rahmah of Allah, they would be provided with something to eat every night. They would struggle, but sometimes Allah Ta'ala used to help them, right? And this is what we call true tawakkul, right? He would try his best, right? Normally if we saw someone in that case, we would say, please, brother, knowledge is not fard for you to learn. You've done your fardaman. Now go and, do something for your family, build your family up because you've done enough. Now go help your mother. And he said he would try and supplement his income, but his mother used to say, do not concern yourself with these things. Don't waste your time. Focus on the most important thing, which is learning knowledge. So subhanAllah, at the age of 15, he was licensed to give fatwa by Imam Muslim ibn Khalid al-Zanji in the Haram, who was the famous Mufti of Mecca at the time. And he actually, with that, he actually looked very young at the time. And to the extent that he wasn't even baligh physically. At the age of 15, he was able to become a mufti. And he was licensed to give fatwa.
يا من هو الله الذي لا إله